All right, well, we're just about to get started, but I wanted to thank all of you for joining us. We are going to be focusing on planning for remote events. In this session, we'll be covering different exercises that you can use to really plan for your remote events and make sure you cover all of the angles and cover your bases. As we do so, we'll also talk through how you can engage further with your constituents and alumni, potential technology platforms that can help, and we'll have that Q&A session at the end. I am going to get started in just a minute, still seeing a fair amount of people logging in. So just know that at any point, if you do have questions, while we do have a Q&A session at the end, if you toggle your mouse, you will find a Q&A feature that you can just click into and submit a question, and I can either answer it live or get to it at the end of the call. We are also doing a 15-minute consultation calls with anyone who's interested. They're free, and we're just willing to go into deeper details with you, depending on what you're looking for. I know 30 minutes is short and sweet, and hopefully you'll find some good exercises and activities to help you as you plan for whatever event you're looking for. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing you want to consider is reflecting on the event you were going to have in person. Now, these exercises that I'm walking through could also be used if you were planning an event from scratch. You just have to switch up the questions slightly. However, when you're thinking through the events you originally had planned in person, you want to go into the details of what were the activities, what did you measure for success, who was going to attend. Now, you probably already know this on the top of your mind. However, it's really helpful to actually put it onto paper, onto that shared Google Doc, so the entire team can see what you all envision as the elements to that original event. And that's important for follow-up exercises, but it's also important to level set with your team, making sure that everyone understands their own vision of what that event was for and share their own ideas of what they felt was so important about that event. It's also important to think through the unofficial parts that people experience at an event. As you think through alumni reunions, while you have a lot of formal things scheduled, there's a lot of that informal gathering, those happy hours before the dinner, the coffees, and walking the campus. So you really need to think through all of the angles beyond what you have officially scheduled. We had a question submitted during registration about what do alumni reunions start to look like. So in the context of this first exercise, what you first start to do is capture all of those activities of the event, whether there's that head of school speech, maybe you have a memorial service and that moment of silence for those you've lost, campus tours, faculty speeches, happy hour, you name it. You also want to capture the elements that of why you have alumni attending. Are they to see the continued innovation and growth of your school? Is it to re-engage them with your school through donations and other ways? Is this just for alumni to remember the good old times? You want to capture all of this in this original exercise on that Google Doc. Just share out all of these concepts because you want to make sure that you're thinking through all of the angles. Once you've done so, you really want to discuss, is this event still necessary? And is now the right time to have the event? Full transparency, there are a lot of concerns and questions around fundraising at this time. And I understand that the fiscal year for schools is coming up right around the corner. There are a fair amount of schools I'm aware of that are choosing to hold off fundraising for at least a month and instead trying to prioritize sending out thank yous, acknowledging the community efforts on the front line. You're going to be fighting for dollars for donations to organizations that are helping those without jobs or helping those on the front line. So you really want to make an intentional choice of, and each school is going to have different needs and reasons. So speaking with leadership, really identifying, is this the right time, is a valuable conversation. And if you choose to move forward, excellent. If you realize now is not the right time, that's okay too. And what you can do is still plan for the event, even if it's pushed back a little bit, postponed, delayed, or otherwise. So if you do choose to move on with your event, whatever that might be, you want to go back to your original exercise 1 in that Google Sheet with all of the elements you had. And what you want to do is a prioritization of everything that goes into that in-person event. Have your team identify the necessary elements that they want to continue to capture online. In person, I do something called the dot organization. So I just give people, 3 to 5 dots and have them sticky them over the concepts they want to keep and maintain. This is really easy to transfer onto a Google Sheet. Just give them some check marks and X's in various cells and have your team recognize which elements they want to prioritize and also capture the ones that they don't think are necessary. After doing so, I would consult with leadership to determine if there are any other topics or elements that the original event didn't originally have planned, but might need to be captured in this current environment that you're in. After aligning with leadership, that's when you start to look at your elements that you've prioritized and label them into nice to have or need to have. This is an important exercise that we'll get to later on this session, but be difficult and make some difficult decisions here. There are a lot of elements that you might want to have, but they're truly not a need to have. This is a new environment you are operating in. This is an experiment of trying to transfer something you have in person to online. So really slimming down what your original vision of the in-person event was to the core essentials is going to be necessary to have that successful online event. After you've prioritized, focus on those need-to-have elements and brainstorm what that could look like in the new reality. I always encourage my team to look at industries outside of the school space or where we're working to look for ideas of how other people are doing this. With any brainstorming session, you want to set out some ground rules. There are no bad ideas, ask questions. Now's the time to be absurd with these ideas, and it's time to be creative. There are no limitations when you're brainstorming. You're not thinking about technology. You're not thinking about cost. That comes later. So in this brainstorming stage, you're supposed to look at your need to have elements and come up as a team with ideas of how could this look like in the new reality. So going back to that question of what do alumni reunions start to look like? There's a lot that you can actually capture and transfer online than of what you've had in person. Your head of school can still provide an opener. You can still do happy hours by class, just move them online. You can thank those on the front line. You can have those moments of silence. And even from the standpoint of any sort of musical component or having people get involved as an entertainment piece, you can do remote shows. A lot of artists today are doing living room performances. And so it's possible to bring that online. What you want to make sure you're considering, though, is while it's doable to transfer these online, what is that must-have and how could it look? Are you going to do this all in one massive session? Are there different breakout groups? Are you doing it in different segments, one session on one day and have it over a several day experience? What you want to also consider is the informal gatherings. From an alumni reunions perspective, a lot of alum are reconnecting with their classmates, checking in with them, hearing updates on their life. As far as a happy hour by class goes, a lot of technology today allows one speaker at a time, and it makes it a little hard to have those informal side conversations. One thing that Wavelength offers is providing some online engagement tools where users, your alum, could claim a Zoom account and invite members to a Zoom hangout. They can invite their entire class or individual users or small groups, and they can search for each other using our map-based search functionality and clicking into individual profiles. It's a really fun way for alumni to reconnect with each other, especially as people are seeking community more and more these days. Another question we were asked during the registration phase was, how do you secure auction items during a pandemic? This is a really difficult question. You have to consider that a lot of the small businesses today are closed doors because they are not an essential business. So getting donations of gift baskets or lessons is quite difficult. What you do need to consider is reimagining what that auction model might be and adapt it. Could you do a split profits with the small business who is providing remote classes to cooking or fitness? Could you split the benefits of gift baskets or any sort of entertainment that can be provided through online technology? Random ideas like food catering. Could you work with a local restaurant that would deliver food to whatever group of community members are interested so that they have a shared dinner on the same night and are communicating and chatting and connecting through a happy hour online? There are other ways to fundraise outside of auction items as well. That could be trying to do a dare on social media, contests, or raffles, 50-50 raffles. What you're also able to do, one thing you have to consider from an items perspective is when you're collecting items like gift baskets, if you were to go that route, it is very difficult to think through how to reduce potential contamination of who's touching what products, who's picking up. There's a lot of logistics there. However, there is a lot of energy around supporting your local community. So keep that in mind. You can work with small businesses. You might have to create a new model, but it might still be doable. The next stage after brainstorming is research. Here you are supposed to think through, of all of your ideas, what's feasible, what's doable, what might need tech support, whether you need staff or other school participants to help out, or if some of these ideas are a stretch but would be really great to include in whatever event you're planning. What you should do is, of all of the elements and all those brainstorming ideas, bucket them into those 4 sections that I just mentioned. Assign the team members to do a little bit of research to see what's feasible in buckets 2 and 4. So what technology is out there to support these ideas, what of these ideas that are super cool that we'd like to include, how could that be done? And bucket 3 is one that you might have to take up with your peers from other teams or leadership to see what is doable. This research for technology platforms is difficult because there's so much out there. There are so many options, and this entire webinar is recorded. These slides will be shared. All of these brands, I have linked their websites to, so you can click in to really explore what's out there. This is just a small list of many for fundraising technology support. But what you need to really think through is what works for you. And you have to do the same for when you're looking at webinar and meeting technologies. There's a lot out there, from Zoom to Google to GoToMeeting, Adobe Connect. Whatever platform you end up going with, you have to ask a few questions. What technology is your school using already? Can it work for you? What is the user experience and how complex is it to learn? Think of the users that you're asking to participate in your event. That's anywhere from parents of the community to alumni who might be recently graduated or could be 50 years out from having attended your school. Regardless, the technologies you are using should be simple and user-friendly, and you also have to think from the administrative side how easy it is for you to use to manage the day of the event itself. This goes along with the cost of the technology as well. Remember when I said earlier in this session that you had to think through what are the need to have versus nice to have? This is essential when you are looking for what technologies work for you. You have to look at the core features and what they offer. Do they align with your needs? Are they answering all of those need to have elements of your event? Each technology is going to have a lot of bells and whistles and fun ideas, but if they do not hit the essential core needs and elements that you are seeking from the event, you're going to have to keep looking for other opportunities. Again, that's why it's so important to look at need to have versus nice to have. Another opportunity with some of these technologies is they might offer ideas up that you never considered before. So the research phase of looking for what's out there to support your event is really essential, and it's helpful to have more than just yourself looking because there's so many options, and it will give you a variety of inputs from people who have various technological capabilities. After you've started to look into technology, you really want to know your technology well before an event. This means that you need to learn about how attendees can interact with you and with each other. For example, these are some Zoom screenshots from meetings where if I were sharing my screen, I could actually allow attendees to draw right on my screen on a live slide. Same with allowing attendees to interact with each other. They can chat with each other, they can post so everyone can view, or they can send an individual outreach to another attendee or participant. That's the same with breakout rooms. You as a leader in Zoom, if you are the host, can break people into different groups. This would separate people into various happy hour groups or discussion groups, depending on what you're looking for. Again, this is all available through Zoom. Each of the other technologies have their own capabilities. What you want to look at is what do you seek from an engagement standpoint? What are you hoping your users experience? And does the technology you're choosing deliver on that? The last thing Zoom also offers, and this is just a few of many technologies, but also a few of many features Zoom offers, is making meetings and webinars interactive through polls and Q&A. So you've just, since the start, you started to brainstorm you started with the event itself, thinking through what elements went into the live event that you were looking for. Then you went into identifying, is it important to proceed with this event? Are there other elements that we need to move and include in this new online version? And then you went into brainstorming of what could this look like in the new reality of today. And you jumped into the research. Now it's time for planning. So now you've done your back-end research, you've done your brainstorming. From a planning perspective, you need to understand the time and effort it's going to take to finish up and end with that final event that's successful with an engaged constituent base. That means developing the agenda, sending the invite with enough time to allow people to block their calendars, and give you and the team enough time to determine the timeline for tasks, who's owning it, and completing all of those project goals. One of the questions I was asked is, how do you manage a giving day as a team without an in-person war room? And again, it goes back to the exercises I talked about today. For an event like a giving day, where you have an in-person war room where everything is real-time and live, you need to think through what technologies allow you to see all of the elements that are live, that can be shared across everyone's tiles, whether that's computer screens, phones, what have you. Google Docs and Google Sheets is a valuable tool for that, to keep real-time information in front of everyone. Your team also needs ways to communicate with each other that isn't multi-channel and that frees up their email and phone for giving day purposes. So choosing a conference platform that both has audio, video, chat, and screens to share is really useful so that they can use other tablets and phones to communicate out during the giving day itself. And lastly, when you're thinking about a war room scenario, you likely have food, breaks, and some comfort involved in an in-person war room. So brainstorm how that could look for supporting your team as they individually work from their homes. How do you accommodate for their family situation? How do you accommodate for what type of workstation they have? Having a personal conversation with each one to identify what their needs are that same day would be really valuable. When planning for success, you have to have a few contingency plans. Technology can have its glitches, and you have an opportunity to really consider what are all of the variables that go into this online event. That means how many people are going to be attending, who's going to be speaking, what is that engagement looking like? Making sure you have plans for if fewer people attend, if someone loses their audio, if you have a glitch with Wi-Fi, what does that look like? And having several people supporting the event from your team is going to be really essential. What you also need to consider is the constituent itself. All of your constituents are juggling home life, that's work, kids, and others. They're also having to figure out how much screen time they have and what is meaningful so that is not too time consuming. By that, I mean, you can have a lot of extra content and great content to share with each of your constituents. But if you're just sharing this audio and screen with a user, what type of engagement do they have? Are they just staring at a screen like they've been doing at work all day? How can they be interactive, either being asked questions or communicating with each other? So make it engaging. What's going to keep people logged into the event and actually listening in? Think of games, entertainment, healthy competitions that don't require a huge barrier to entry. And embrace the novelty of the situation. Don't ignore the seriousness of this event, but understand that this is a community effort and everyone is in this together, and celebrate that as a community. And then lastly, execute. Everyone is in a new scenario with COVID-19. We are each facing it differently, both with emotions and needs and family life. And people are going to be understanding as you address all of these events and try and move them online. So give yourself a little breathing room to be okay with things going wrong or things not being perfect, because in this day and age, what you have to focus on is the intent behind your activity and that you're developing the community and also sharing your message out to those who you want to hear it. So we've just covered a lot, but you can find all of this on our resource hub. We have other webinars, other documents, other templates. And again, as I mentioned, we will be sharing out this webinar with you all after the call. Are there any questions? I did see a raised hand earlier, and I'm sorry I didn't get to it, but feel free to ask your question in the Q&A box. I just got a question about what is a reasonable time frame from start to finish with these exercises. It's really up to you and your team, as well as what else you are trying to do at this time. This can be moved pretty quickly at a fast pace. The biggest challenge is going to be that research side with technologies. But what you're going to also need to focus on is the timing between the invite being sent and actual the date of the event. So what I would do is always give about 2 weeks between when you send the invite out and when the invite itself is happening, unless you already have that save the date out. And then give yourself a little bit of buffer room, if possible, to be able to address all of the needs in planning for that event. We just got another question about online happy hours can get loud and awkward. Any tips to mitigate this? I would say that you probably have 1 or 2 people per class in the top of your mind that you trust, that are go-to, whether they're volunteers or just people that you value in getting their insights. I would use them to help in monitoring those happy hours. It's a lot to ask you or your team to review and participate in all of the happy hours going, and instead trying to empower the classmates themselves to be aware and monitor the approach of the happy hours. That's also why it's important to try and do some breakout sessions to make it smaller than a full class. Smaller groups is really valuable here to allow you to have those more chit-chat conversations without too large a platform, because you're also going to have people who feel uncomfortable talking with so many people on just one call. We had a question come in about virtual commencement. How do you do audience and grad participation? That's a really good question, and one that, again, you're going to have to think through what that participation looks like from the standpoint of technologies. Audio is really difficult when you have large groups of people on a call or celebrating, but there are other ways that they can show visual support, whether it's some clapping hands or like video. I think one thing I would keep in mind from a commencement standpoint is making sure that you have the audio and visual of the right people and panelists speaking, and have those breaks in between to allow either breakout groups to have some celebration amongst parents and students together. As I mentioned, Zoom has some breakout groups that allows you to separate people ahead of time. So maybe trying to do some more smaller group celebrations so people actually feel like they're participating will be helpful. And having the full group commencement experience be a little bit shorter and led more in a webinar type platform than an interactive one with the interactive plan later is better. Excellent. Another question that came in is, how do you incorporate students and performance into some of these events? I would recommend doing some pre-recording of students. I think students are really valuable in participation, whether that's performance or speaking. There are some students that can very much participate live, whether that's answering questions, but if it is a performance with students, I do think pre-recording them would be valuable. Again, I mentioned technology glitches, and there might be some nerves, so having the student practice is always valuable there. Another question that came in is, how do you measure success and set expectations with this engagement? Measuring success is going to be a little different than how you measure success in the past, both because it's now online rather than in person, and it's a different experience in terms of people's emotional states and financial states. Having an honest and open communication with your team, as well as with leadership, to set better expectations is necessary and important. I would celebrate engagement and community at this time, and and reassess what those goals are and be a little bit more open to having some softer goals than you originally planned. We've just covered a lot today in a quick 30-minute session. I hope you found this useful. Again, we will be sharing out this audio and slides after this meeting is over. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at katie@searchwavelength.com. Thank you so much.